All right, hello everyone. This is Nick and Luke doing our influence project on the NFL. You can see we're all dressed up in my Skull Vikings jersey. Nick's in his Keep Pounding Panthers. And today we're going to talk about whether or not games should be changed to reduce the number of preventable injuries in football players. And to do that, we're first going to run through the issue. Then we're going to talk about the research and some case studies, some real life scenarios. We're going to move into our empathy video next, and then talk about our survey and the main takeaways. So the main issue is preventable professional football injuries. So why is this important? Well, there are long-lasting effects that can impact the lives of players, their families, and their local communities. These effects, these injuries can cause violence in players against both themselves and others. They are also mostly completely preventable if the proper policies and practices were in place, or at the very least, the long-term effects could be mitigated. And then lastly, similar to Hawk's Nest, after retiring, most of these professional players are unemployable due to their diagnoses. So who are we trying to influence? Well, anyone who watches football, both religiously or infrequently. Also, parents of children who are playing football or are interested in participating in the sport. And then finally, any stakeholder to the NFL or college football teams. So what are the changes we're looking to make? Well, lengthening the runtime of games to allow for proper player care, removing temporary fixes like numbing agents in favor of keeping players out of the game permanently if injured, implementing more rigid policies to keep players out of the game when injured, players wearing more or less armor to try and prevent these injuries, and then limiting the number of games in a regular season to allow for more recovery time.
So now we're going to talk about some case studies, some individuals who played in the NFL, who experienced several injuries, and then their life suffered because of it. And for the rest of this section, there's going to be a lot of information, specifically in the research section. I mean, I have to speed through it just because of the time crunch, but if you want to read more, you can pause the screen and read what I have. So starting out with Junior Seau. Junior Seau was one of the first NFL players who started the conversation about CTE developing from concussions. He was a 12-time Pro Bowler, very famous, very successful football player, who after he retired became very depressed. His family reported seeing a lot of changes in his behavior, and he ultimately committed suicide by shooting himself in the heart so that his brain could be studied. And when his brain was studied, they found that he had developed one of the latest stages of CTE. And then Aaron Hernandez, another famous football player, became very famous with the New England Patriots as a tight end. He also developed CTE as a result of several concussions, but before that was known, he was handed a life sentence in connection to a double homicide that he committed, and then he hung himself in prison. Following his death, people studied his brain and found once again that he had developed severe CTE. And now going into the research. So as you can see, injuries, concussions, and CTE, which stands for chronic traumatic encephalopathy, are happening at a very high rate. And just because you may not know the general base rates of these injuries, on this next slide, I have shown how unlikely it is for just a general person to get CTE. It's about 6% of the general population has CTE, and then depending on the study in the NFL, that number is inflated to between 90 and 99%. So there's definitely something going on here. It's almost guaranteed that by playing in the NFL, you're going to struggle with this later on in life. And just to give a little bit of clarity as to what CTE is, it's a progressive and fatal brain disease. As you can see in this graphic, your brain just kind of starts eroding and falling apart almost. And so that's why people become more aggressive, is that it could potentially be damaging that part of their brain associated with aggression. And so this is just a list of outcomes that are associated with both concussions and CTE. People who have several concussions or who have developed CTE are more likely to be depressed. They're more likely to have deflated self-image or confidence. They're also more likely to be more aggressive and more impulsive. That's where people get into a lot of issue with the self-harm and harm to others following their football career. And then lastly, memory loss and Alzheimer's are very related with CTE and concussions.
All right, and now we're going to move into our empathy video. And because we're on a time crunch, we had a relatively long video, around 9 minutes and 30 seconds. We're going to cut out about a minute, roughly halfway through.
He admires most, his ability to make adjustments at halftime.
To a rolling left with the grain, and down he goes. Josh Tupou, and well, and of course the last thing the Dolphins wanted to see. I mean, last week it looked for all the world. Everybody thought head injury, concussion, passed the protocol, came back second half, led him to a victory.
You think about the back, the ankle, but he gets thrown to the ground.
Again, wrenching that back, which was the issue last week.
Yep.
So they work on him.
Defensive backs than any team in football 95% of the time. So you're essentially a weak side linebacker in the run game as well.
Here's Higgins wide open to midfield and lowers the shoulder for 13.
This is where Joe Burrow is so good.
And now another Bills player is down. Can't tell exactly who that is. Maybe Hamlin. Administering CPR through these past two breaks that we've taken. As Lisa said, Damar Hamlin has been down for over 9 minutes now. With everybody watching, praying, and hoping for the best. Well, the players now for both teams are so tight around Damar Hamlin, it's tough to get our cameras in there. Maybe that's for the best, but they have him on a backboard, I am told, and now on a stretcher. We'll send it away from here. Just nothing more to say at this point. We'll give you an update as soon as we can. We'll send it to Susie Colburn.
right, welcome back. We hope you enjoyed the video. Now we're going to talk about the results and takeaways we want you to gain from this topic, specifically starting with our survey. So we had a sample size of 10. Nick and I sent it to our family and friends. We sent them both the pre-test and the post-test, which had multiple questions on the 5-point scale. They're listed below, but let's go ahead and just dive into our results. So we're going to look at both our pre-test and our post-test responses here. I'll go ahead and run through the questions first. So I frequently watch football. I enjoy watching football. These are like demographic questions. Then the violent collisions, which sometimes occur in football games, bother me. I would support making some changes to the game to avoid player injuries from occurring. I would support holding players out of games longer than the medical recommendation to allow for additional recovery. I would support the removal of numbing injections and pain relievers as a method to get players back on the field as soon as possible. I would support longer timeouts and injury assessments, even if it meant longer game times. I would support players wearing more protective equipment, even if it slowed down the rate of play. And I would support players wearing less protective equipment, even if it reduced the number of collisions. So as you can see, when I'm scrolling through these questions, we have the yellow, orange, and blue being the no opinion to disagree side, and the green and purple being agree and strongly disagree. There's quite mixed results on all of these questions here. And the best part is that if we move over to our post-test, we can see that for every single one of these questions, there's a dramatic shift from people disagreeing or having no opinion to the majority of our participants strongly agreeing and agreeing with these statements. So overall, what's this saying? Well, it's saying that people do want to change. People do want to see healthier football players. And we hope that you took something away from this, just like our participants did, because it is possible to make these changes. And the next time you're watching a football game, we hope that you think about the video you watch, think about the research Nick posed, and think about the solutions we're offering. Thank you all for listening.